What's up, guys? It is Monocrafts Monday, and this week we are over at the Build on EXPO with Cape Cod Lumber. Myself, Tyler, and John sit down with Tom Ellerbrook up on stage, and we talk about attracting, developing, and maintaining youth talent and our struggles and what we've learned. If you guys were there, we appreciate your support, and I know a lot of you guys made a fair amount of travel for that day. And if you guys weren't, now you have the opportunity to listen.
So my job here is to essentially moderate this panel. I am not a craftsman, although I have a ton of respect for the skilled trades. And I'm going to do my best to ask some questions and hopefully bring some knowledge to you guys from their perspective and not mine by any means. So hopefully I can just stay out of the way. Before, I'm not sure if everyone here knows each of these gentlemen, so I will pass the mic across here. If you just want to introduce yourself quickly, each of you. No long, this is where I was born story. Name, company name, and I guess...
That matters.
All right. Name, company name, and how long you've been in the industry.
Johhny, owner of Vintage Builders. Vintage Builders has been in the business for 2 years. I'm approaching 24 years in the business, local to Massachusetts.
Nick Schiffer, owner of NS Builders. We're going into our 6th year. I have no idea how many years I've been in the business. Also a co-host of the Modern Craftsman podcast. You forgot that part? Not a master carpenter. But we're a team of 15, and all of my team, I believe, is sitting in this corner here.
You always rub it in with the team thing.
Team, sorry.
Tyler Grace, I'm the owner of TRG Home Concepts. We're going into our 10th year. Dang. Yeah, 10. And by we, I mean sometimes me, sometimes 2 people. Yeah. Oh, one thing. If you guys have questions or anything, just holler during this. I feel like I don't need to wait till the end, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not paying for this, but it might make more sense to while you have the question.
No, like our podcast, we like to have a discussion. So if you guys want to chime in and offer some insight or a question or a comment, feel free.
I can speak for myself only and say that there is no ego here. I can't speak for these 3.
That's a fair statement.
So I want to kick it off is, as Chris said, we're talking about attracting, developing, and retaining talent within the skilled trades or within your own businesses. I think it's no secret that there's a skills trade gap out there on a macro level, but we're not going to tackle the macro level because it doesn't it's more about on a micro level. It's 80% of all, the NAHB put a stat out there that 80% of all construction businesses are looking for help, which means 80% of this room is looking for more people. And these guys have a unique experience, both personal and from their podcast and talking with a lot of different people. So hopefully, we want to dig in on this topic. And as Tyler said, if there's questions, shoot a hand up and let's take them as we go. I guess I want to just start off asking, from your personal experience, in attracting people to your businesses, what's helped? Where's the first place you look, or what is in terms of adding people to your staff?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing, speaking back to when we started growing it was a carpentry company. It was just myself. It was similar to Tyler, where it was me and sometimes one person. And as at that time, I was naive to think that I was the only one that cared as much as I cared, and that I was the only one that could do what I could do. And as we started promoting and building a brand behind the business, people started reaching out and saying, listen, I'm just as good, or I'm better at it, and give me a shot. I want to talk. I want to be able to introduce myself, and maybe I can bring value to it. And Mike, which I believe he's still here, he was the first carpenter that I had hired. And when he came on board, it was a quick realization that, this is something that is more than me, and there's an opportunity that there could be more people out there that are equally or more talented than myself. And I say it all the time that the team that we are now, there's guys in there, and most of them, if not all of them, are better at what I started doing by myself. So it was really promoting my company and really explaining the culture and what was important to me from a quality standpoint on the business end, but also from the personal end of understanding, what each and every one of them needed personally in their life.
John, do you hire? I feel like your employees aren't coming from Instagram, are they?
Employees?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 of them.
From Instagram?
Yeah. One of them came from this event last year. 2 years ago?
When we were at Cape Cod
Yeah,
Lumber.
the meetup. Yeah.
I didn't know that. You're quiet about that.
Talk about it.
I mean, it's tough because it was not the intent. Like, we were never pushing the business on social media to acquire the right employees. It just happened. We just kind of told our story, and people will come to you, like send you an email, send you a DM, and it's your job as an employer to kind of be ready for that and accept it. Meaning, hey, if I get a DM from somebody and I'll look at their social media feed and be like, all right, they seem passionate about what they do, I'll then have them DM the info at Vintage Builders. That way I can keep track of that. I may not be ready for it right away, but if the right jobs come along, I want to have the right people that fit our ethos, from your words.
Interesting. What you said is that you weren't doing it to hire people, and that's true in like the beginning of us growing. We weren't looking for people. We naturally started, I'm going to use the word collecting people because we felt as though they were a good fit. And then, there was a handful of times where if, on our page, we may have promoted that we were looking for help. And to reflect back to Sean's first talk, we didn't write help wanted or we're hiring. We came in at an approach, I think one of them was titled like, your job sucks. And it went right into like, this is why your job sucks, because you hate it. Let's give you an opportunity to do something that you love.
You mentioned, I guess, culture and fit. Those are words that you just said. What were you and anyone, what are you looking for when someone comes to you? How are you making sure that you have a right fit for your culture?
It always starts with personality. I mean, I think everyone that I've ever talked to, it's always been very casual. It's been a conversation, and it's very similar to a client. Like, I want to have a phone call, and then I want to maybe grab coffee or meet somewhere and just.
It's like dating.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't like you, it's just not gonna work. Like,
it's not you. It's
like,
me.
hey, I appreciate it. Like your time. It's just it's not a good fit. It has to be a good fit right from that point.
But I think it is very similar to what you do with a customer. You don't work for everyone. You take a specific customer, and I think that it's the same approach with your employee. That you want to make sure that they understand what you guys are about, and you have to accurately depict the daily operations of your business and what their job will be. Otherwise, you're setting expectations that aren't accurate.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of people that hate their job. I mean, I hated the environment that I was in for a long time. And when we put it out there on social media, it attracts the right people, So it's like when you're hustling and people reach out to you and you're not putting an ad in, you're not putting anything on Craigslist or whatever, these are the people you want. They're hustling. They're trying to get into this little bubble that we have. And they know that we're hustling. We know we have no time, but they're like, hey, I can meet you on a Saturday. It's like immediately you're checking off.
Like being eager to just like introduce.
Yeah, not just a 9 to 5. And it's tough. You're not going to put that on a survey. Hey, do you work extended hours? Like, are you passionate? Everyone's going to check that off. So it's, if you can put it out there, and then it is on you, though, to make sure the avenues are there for people to get in touch with you.
So I was just having a conversation with a guy named Dylan from New Hampshire, and what we were saying, looking for in a potential employer, somebody to work with us, not necessarily the passion, where he was saying it's almost too romantic where you're in love with what you're doing, but I think it's more of a hunger for somebody who wants to learn, who wants to immerse themselves in what you're doing. I think that experience isn't, depending on where you are in your company, you don't necessarily need experience, you don't need a skill set, those can all be taught. But I think that finding the personality for somebody who wants to grow and grow with your company, within your company, and somebody who's hungry to continue to refine their skills, I think is important.
I mean, it's attitude and drive. That is the biggest.
And hunger.
Yeah.
And attitude.
I think one of the things that you're absolutely right, Johhny, in terms of setting expectations. Or Tyler said setting expectations during, the interview process. But if you're utilizing Instagram, you're setting those expectations. They're not going to come to you if someone doesn't, wants to just push a broom and not be inspired to help vintage builders. They're not going to reach out to you. And I think you guys use that platform to set the expectations for what you're expecting.
Agree, but there's an elaboration on that. Like, social media is funny in that way, where it's, you're promoting what you want to promote, whether it's all good, all bad, whatever. You're promoting what you want to portray. But ask anyone that that works for my company or someone that is working for a company that is being promoted through that manner, that the likelihood of them having their ish together in real life is a lot more slim than what it looks like through that eye. And like for me, to speak candidly, it's like that's one thing I've struggled with, is always to put together roles and responsibilities. Molly has been all over me. It's like putting that together has been something that is extremely important, and setting those expectations and nailing that, because for me it's always been about personality and culture and the people, and knowing that experience mattered, but for us that was going to come. And from a carpentry standpoint, a cabinet making standpoint, project management standpoint, but also from my side, where my job is to set these expectations.
Shifting gears, because we got a question. All right.
Hi, I'm Dave.
Hey, Dave.
I'm an apprentice right now, carpenter. One thing that was really helpful with the company I work with right now, we talk about expectations. My employer laid out very clear expectations for 2 years for me and for him, my mentor. You talked about it a few times on the podcast and a few times on Instagram. What are the expectations for your lead carpenters and for your apprentice carpenters in your company?
Can everyone hear that?
Yeah,
No. Here.
he asked.
It's all right. I was a high school teacher for 10 years, so. The whole thing? What are your expectations, Nick, for your lead carpenters and your apprentice carpenters?
So, and to elaborate on when I said that I would speak candidly, that is more daily, weekly, monthly kind of review, sit down, and we kind of map that out. And that's something that I am, to this day, right now, working on. If he has a Word document outlining that, please send it to me, because I'd like to edit it or copy it. But yeah, thanks, John. But it is, for me, like everything is a constant involvement and improvement. So that's been a struggle for me to outline what those roles and responsibilities are beyond a conversation sitting across the table and working together collaboratively on it. A lot of these guys have come to me and said, hey, this is what I think my responsibilities are. And I look at them like, yeah, you're right. But it's, it has to be more formal to that. And that's, me speaking honestly, that's something I need to personally work on and be better at. So I didn't really answer your question, but.
Well, I think that was, kind of transitioning a little bit. That was the path I was going down when I, some notes before this. When I met Nick 3 years ago, it was Nick and one other guy. And now 3 years, I don't even know if it's been that long.
Mike's been with us 3 years and 4 days, 5 days.
Right. And there's a whole crew of black shirts over there. So that coming from a corporate standpoint, my company, we have a human resource department. We have people that help us with development and career paths and all that type of stuff, and mid-year reviews and final reviews and all those types of things, setting expectations. What's worked? For you, you've kind of said that you're working on it, but in all three of you guys, what's worked in terms of on that end?
What's worked? We've been in the business for 2 years.
I know, but you have experience from before, and you talked about exit interviews and stuff. Like, I think you, out of everyone here, like here, not there, can answer that better, because because of what I said, it's being.
I mean, what the question that was asked from the crowd was that, like, how do you set growth? Like, how do you, like, what's the expectations, and how do you show that growth so someone has a path in your company? If they don't see a path that's going to work for them, then they're probably going to exit and leave and go somewhere else if it doesn't align. And you can't do smokes and mirrors and think, hey, promises. I think I've been promised 3 companies in my life. And you bust your ass for so long, it doesn't work out. I think it's being the boss you've always wanted to be, that you've always wanted to have, and trying to really, it's a tough thing. I'm getting on a sidetrack, but our day-to-day, like you said, you want to put it in writing. We get immersed in all these other things that we have to do. So like writing it down, having roles and responsibilities gets trumped by like a client phone call, a fire to put out, whatever it is. And it's tough to negotiate that, and it can be hard as an owner to look beyond at the employee you have as a person, and you're just trying to drive the ship and get the schedule done, get the budget ready to go, and you can forget that person's really busting their ass and be like, hey, you know what? You did a great job on Friday. Like, you killed it for me. And I think remembering that when you're a boss, you still have to be a good friend to that employee. Because when they're going through something, whatever it is, you need to be able to have the blinders off that you're like, is there something up? Like, do I need to know what's going on? And being cognizant of that will keep people around. Meaning you're not just going to lose people because, oh yeah, all he does is say it's, get this done, or I used to be quoted back, it's always something coming up. There's always something you need to hustle for, and there always will be. That's why none of us have time to be home.
But also keeping the conversation open. You tell a story on one of the episodes where you had a guy leave an old company.
Yeah.
And it was just like, hey man, I got to leave. This isn't working out. He left, and you found out the reason he left was because insurance, yeah. Something you could have solved
in a heartbeat. Yeah.
And it was because that conversation, or there wasn't enough. I'm going to use the word transparency, which I use too often, but that there wasn't transparency there, where it wasn't. If you had known that, it would have been corrected, and that guy would have stuck around, and it was a big loss for you guys.
Yeah, but it's also having that relationship where I think a lot of bosses I've had where I've always had a hard time having that conversation with a boss. Like, hey, I was owed a raise at 6 months. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm with Ben and I'm like, when did we hire so-and-so? Like, are we coming up to a year? Do I owe somebody like a sit down? Like, right. It is a fast-paced thing that we do. And it's just having that beyond profit and the job and the cool photos and the Instagram, it's being cognizant that you can't do it without them. Same as your subs. Like, I can't tomorrow forget about everybody and produce what we're doing right now. It's the team that we have, and I mean, you have an army, so you have to keep them because you have to have all those products running and everyone answer those questions. That's why you have people doing it.
I just think it's hard with our industry as well, because unless you're the scale where you have 100 employees, everyone has multiple roles and wears multiple hats. So like defining those roles and what your expectations are, I feel like is consistently inventorying that and then revisiting that and adapting. It's not as easy as, well, this is your job description and this is what I expect of you. It's a month from now, 2 weeks from now, revisiting that and kind of adapting to that. It's not, it's not just one and done, where this is none of us, maybe I'm wrong, but none of us are big enough where it's like we have one single person who just does budgeting for all of our jobs. You're doing budgeting and project management and schedule and everything else.
I mean, we talked about this earlier. It's organic, meaning if someone has a flaw as an owner and as a leader, our job is to kind of compensate for that or hire an assistant PM for them that doesn't do well with scheduling. Maybe that conversation sucks for them, but they're killing it on budget and the day-to-day on the site. So you don't want to give up on that person or that employee or that teammate. You want to be able to find another fit for them. So putting a hard role on that is really tough for us. It's more of like, hey, we'll slide that around. I'll compensate personally for that if that's the case, because I'm not going to give up on you. You might get that in 3 years. I'm willing to wait for that because you're just going to be an even better person on the crew.
Who here's an employee, not a business owner? So like what, I got to pick someone. Who wants to answer? I feel like what would help if you were walking into a job, would you want to consistently check back and work with your employer or your boss to develop your list or role within that company? Who wants to, what would work best for you? All right, you're close.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys for having this conversation. Something I read a while ago and I was telling my husband about is a small business. Let's face it, the country was founded on small businesses. So we're the ones that are making it happen right now. Yeah, there's the, Jeff Bezos and all those guys, but, it's really the small business owner as well. And when you're working for a small business, like I work for a franchise, I actually work for Closets by Design. So we're franchised, but I work for a franchise. And I'll tell you, I have the best boss I've ever had in my life. And the reason why she's so great is because she's like my friend. We have conversations. Listen, we've had definite communications and breakdowns, but through the course I've learned in the business, she's got my back, I have her back. She's done things for me, I've done things for her. It's really a true partnership, and it's a true friendship. And one day I will leave, but not right now. I just I set a date for myself, January. I'm out of here because there's certain things I don't want to put up with in the business. I'm too old for this. And she worked with me, and now she's like, she doesn't want me to leave. I'm one of the best designers. I have a work ethic. She doesn't want to, those are things that it's hard to find sometimes when somebody's working that hard for you. So I hope that answers your question.
So she's saying that finding somebody to create more than just a professional relationship with, if that's the correct takeaway. You have more than just a boss employee relationship.
Well, she doesn't micromanage me.
Yeah, I think that goes to John's point. It's having that, having the personal relationship allows you to have those hard conversations, where if there isn't that kind of open door policy, you don't feel as comfortable asking for something. And rather than asking, you give up on it.
Is there a career path? Like, in terms of like, I'm going to get specific with Tyler and with Steve. Was Steve, did you know what he wanted to do?
I feel like I thought that I did, but maybe it was more so what I wanted him to do. Looking back on it, it's almost as if I wanted more for him than he wanted for himself. So I think that Steve was an employee who was with me for 2.5 years, and then this past spring we parted ways, and I couldn't help but part ways with him. And I think that a lot of the issues were that he would just go along with anything, so when he would give me his opinion, he was almost just telling me what I wanted to hear, and it wasn't necessarily what he wanted. And I think that was fine until it got to a certain point where he started to struggle, and then he continued to kind of flounder, and there was no progression, and he couldn't grow, and I couldn't help him because he wasn't actually being honest and open with me to help him the way that I needed to. And then I became more frustrated. He kind of floundered more, and I think that it perpetually snowballed until it got to the point where I called Nick one afternoon and was like, I gotta let Steve go. He's like, well, hold on. Don't you want to try and talk to him first? And I was like, I didn't realize it, but I've been talking to him for 3 months trying to fix this. And I think maybe had I slowed down long enough, and it's tough with him, but really aside from work, oh yeah, we went out to dinner because we worked late. We went out to lunch because we had to run from one job to another. Had I integrated some social aspect to our relationship where it's like, hey Steve, what do you really want out of this? Rather than just be like, hey, we could do this, we could do that, and him yesing me to death, that maybe it would have been different.
Was he not still contributing to you, though, into your business?
Yeah, so he was, but what happened with Steve is I spent 2.5 years trying to build him up and build his self-esteem. He had one big mistake that I think took a huge hit on him, and he kind of lost a lot of his self-esteem, and everything that we had built up for 2.5 years went down the toilet, and I think that he continued to trip over himself, and he couldn't get out from under himself. And I brought somebody else on because I thought that was the issue, rather than just sitting down with Steve and being like, hey, what's up? I blamed myself, then I blamed the new kid, and then finally I realized, hey, he can't work with me, he can't work alone, he can't work with the new kid. It's not us, it's him. But it took a long time of getting there, and it was me not really talking and me just inventorying what was going on and then coming up with solutions or potential solutions myself, rather than just being like, hey, let's take the day off today and go sort this out. You know, I could have saved months worth of headaches or salvaged a relationship or a business relationship had I done that.
But you had a plan for him.
Yeah, I mean,
you were starting him off as a laborer, very little experience, and then even 2 years in, you were starting to give him as lead opportunities on site with his own truck.
Yeah, so like that was the goal, and that was the goal that I thought we had mutually decided on. But looking back on it, I feel like those were my goals that Steve just couldn't say no to. You know, he was just one of those kids who, if I was like, hey, John, where do you want to go eat? And you're like, I don't care. And I just tell you, well, let's go to McDonald's. You're like, yeah, McDonald's good. Steve could have hated McDonald's, but he would have gone because he wouldn't stand up and be like, no, I'd rather have Wendy's.
But if that did work out, what was his, did you have like a 5-year plan? What was...
No, I don't think that we actually, I don't have my life that together that, I'm trying, if I get through today, I'm okay. Like, tomorrow, the weekend, you know, but, I don't have my 5 years planned out for myself. And that's just, everything in my life kind of revolves around my personality and what I can deal with. And for me to plan for 5 years in advance is just way too overwhelming. So I think that what I try and do is little by little kind of look at that big picture and make strides towards that, and then adapt and audible and everything else. But the goal eventually would be for Steve to be running his own jobs and me to be running my own jobs, or Steve with somebody else and have somebody under him, and then I could kind of scale back some. It wasn't for Steve to leave. It wasn't for Steve to start his own company. The goal was for him always to be around, and that was the intent of all of that. But I think that, again, he's the type of kid where he would do anything that you wanted him to do just because he couldn't say no.
Yeah, it sounds like at some point in time, expectations, yours were one, his were totally different. And he didn't have the heart to tell you.
Yeah, and
It's
maybe
hard.
they weren't that much different, but it wasn't that clear. So by the time, it got to the point where it did, maybe they were relatively close to being aligned, but then it just kind of went that way for so long that by the time it actually became a reality, it was like, yeah, there's no coming back from this at this point.
Yeah, I think, we got a question. Go ahead.
I've been in the business for a while now.
Sorry, Tom, my legs are getting tired.
And I ran cabinet shops from Texas to Las Vegas. I started my own cabinet shop. But when I was running cabinet shops for other companies, I would I would use your skill set to do what was best. But I found everybody that I had multiple skill sets. I have a cabinet shop now. We have a construction company. We have a fabrication shop for stone. And the thing is, the skill set I'm finding is just very limited. And the ones that I do have, they're older gentlemen, and they're working, and I have something for them to do. But the skill set, like my laborers and stuff like that I'm trying to build up and grow and get them to do. I find that because of the business is just so demanding, and I have certain things that have to be done in a sequence. If it's not done in that sequence, it doesn't get done right. And I find people want to skip them sequences because they want to do it faster. They want to please me, thinking that if they do it faster, it's going to be better. So kind of what happens is I let them go home early. They 2:30 is, and I go, hey, yeah, you're pretty much done for today. And so my problem is that they don't make enough money for the week to survive on, and I don't like that. And that's a problem I see in my business right now, to keep the guys who I'm trying to build up their skill set, but I don't have anything for them to do at that moment.
I think from what I'm hearing and understanding, and I can't speak to it, I haven't been in business that long, but one thing that I've always thought was really important that we do, or that I've always talked about, is that the willingness to allow people in that role to mess up, to make mistakes. It's going to cost you money. It's going to, it's going to hurt a lot. And it's kind of like restarting the business and going back to square one. But the problem is you have this really big gap of people, guys that know what they're doing, that have been there a long time, guys that don't know what they're doing, and there's no bridge. And you need to facilitate that bridge by allowing them, rather than going home at 2:30, to be like, hey, you know what? Let's hit your 40. Let's spend the next hour. I want to introduce you to, John over here, and he runs the edging machine, and like he's been doing this for 20 years. John, walk him through how you do this, and he does that 2 times a week. I'm using it as an example, but they need the ability to be immersed in the more technical side of it, knowing that they might mess that up. They might put a piece of stone through it, and it's the only piece of stone that looks like the way the client wants it, and it breaks. And
that's a long-term investment. You can't have the short term.
And it's harder, I think, in his case, where he's made those long-term investments for years, and now you feel as though that would be restarting. But unless there is this consistent connection between that guy and the guy that knows as much as anyone, unless there's that consistency, you need to back up and kind of restart to get those people not only interested, but have the ability to learn. And hopefully they learn from mistakes when John's like, hey, don't do it this way because I broke a stone 10 years ago. But maybe, like I said, maybe he does, and then he learns it, and having that conversation. I'm a huge advocate for allowing those mistakes to happen, and then talking about it and learning from it, and not only just for that one person, but huddle around and be like, hey guys, this guy broke a stone, not to poke fun, but why did he break the stone? And this is the lesson he learned, but I also want everyone else to learn.
And then my second question is, so how do you explain that to the client after when things get, so in my business, like the stone and stuff like that, so what happens, and I don't want to make them feel bad. I don't want anybody to feel bad.
You shouldn't.
But in this industry, it's all time, especially like this time of year. I have a party, and my granite tops are supposed to be in on Friday, and I can't say to the customer, well, Joe here's new, and he broke the stone.
But it doesn't. You don't have to make that personal relationship. What if John broke it? That's been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
He could have broke it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who broke it or how it broke. That's the flip side of talking to the client. It's just, this is the reality of it. Obviously this wasn't intentional, but we're in an industry where mistakes happen, and there's human error. It doesn't matter on the experience. That's just you're being open and honest with the client. To a point where they understand what happened, and it sucks. But
I think that the issue with a lot of our industry too is that everyone's making excuses, and nobody just wants to tell the truth. And you don't have to throw somebody under the bus, but if there's an issue, it's just like if you're in somebody's job and there's an issue, rather than trying to cover it up or make it right before anyone knows, explain to the customer why it happened, how you're going to fix it, and what it's going to impact to the schedule, rather than trying to. You just end up going down a rabbit hole where now you're covering your rear end and you're making up excuses and then covering lies, and then you find yourself in a lie later on. I feel like it's one of those things where you should just be as honest and transparent as possible.
Well, I think it speaks to developing skills and training in the corporate world. Talk about this all the time, but it's costly. Right, and those are hidden costs there that, obviously training someone, you're slowing, John was the veteran guy, you're slowing him down too to train the other employee. And, and then he breaks the stone, now the cost, it continues to rise. But I think transparency is so important in those situations. I mean, I also think, I'm just curious, I guess, Nick, because your team is here, in terms of development beyond hard skills like, running certain saws or doing certain cuts or building certain things. Do you have an idea, I don't think Mike's sitting here, but I'm just going to use Mike as an example of where Mike wants to go? Do you know, this is, building off that conversation of Tyler and Steve, do you know what Mike wants?
I think to an extent, yes, but there's a big part of me that would say no, because that's also a constant evolvement. And when Mike started, he was a carpenter, and then he kind of naturally turned into a lead carpenter, and then kind of got thrown into a project management position.
You're so lucky that he left.
I know. Love you, Mike. But
Doug's recording all of this.
It's true. But, you know, I remember sitting down after the project where he was kind of floating between lead carpenter, super project manager, which is a lot of hats. And, you know, it came down to that kind of roles and responsibilities. And I was like, well, you know, and we don't, I wouldn't say they're scheduled, but I make a point to sit down with people, you know, not always on the day that I say, but there's an effort to do that. And, you know, and part of that conversation is, you know, what I think you're evolving into and the position and what you want to do, but also asking. But I also do that, you know, casually throughout the day, throughout the week, you know, hey, how's this going? Like, I know you're a carpenter, now you're a project manager. Like, are you having fun? Is it as fulfilling as, you know, working with your hands? And that, making sure I'm asking those questions and having those conversations, that's what I believe is how I'm maintaining a pulse on, you know, all of these guys and girl.
I think as leaders, like, you know, and managers, that's one of the most important thing is making sure that they're good, that their development is just as important as the development of the business, right? Because if you show you care about, and it's, you know, obviously it's kind of cliche, but you show you care about your team and your employees, they're going to care about your business, right? Johhny, same question to you, I guess, in terms of, you know, Benny. I don't is he an employee or not, or a partner. You know, you worked with him, co-owner, for several years. But before that, he worked for you.
Correct.
And,
I wouldn't even put it that way. He worked with me. Like, I've never.
Didn't you just ask if your wife worked for you earlier?
It was a joke.
Oh.
Come on. Hey, babe. She doesn't work for me.
A round of applause for dealing with it.
So your question was, obviously, first off, I don't like to say that like someone works for me. Like Benny, when we worked together, it was like no matter what was happening, it was never like, for instance, one of the things that was a core thing that happened with us is we had a leak in a house that we were like days away from finishing. And I got the call. Honestly, it's one of those calls that you get, and it's like, I've had to make that call, and it's like, I don't even want to tell my boss. But he called me, and I shot right over there. It wasn't like, hey, how'd this happen? I was like waist deep in a wall trying to figure it out because we're a team together to kind of figure it out. And that goes like miles with people. When you're not like, what happened? What's going on? Who did what? And it's like just focusing on conquering it was kind of key. So I don't want to tangent, but it's not like people work for me. They work with us because I would never ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't do still today. And that's huge. I think one of the things you asked about your guys is having a one kind of track mind on getting something done and then letting them off early. I mean, it goes to culture. I tell my guys now that it's like, hey, I don't care if you want days off. I know we talked about having an open policy until Matt Risinger, someone took 3 months off in his company. And it was like, so we are pretty open about it, but it's like, hey, if you're getting your stuff done, I don't care if you take off and go to golf on Wednesday. You know, it's your responsibility to know what needs to happen and that you're taking on that responsibility. I'm not telling you every week what I want done because now you're just the person I'm telling what to do, not an employee thinking on their own for the company. So I think, you know, you letting people off early to kind of give them a break, they didn't earn it yet. And I think having that mentality as someone there won't be someone that works harder than me, and I'm down for that challenge in the company. So they're always going to push harder. I've always been at companies where I work harder than most of the other people. So it's like, why am I doing this? So it starts with you. And not just, hey, this is what we're doing for policy, go home. They didn't learn anything on that. You didn't get them to do something different for the following week. It's just a revolving door. So if you create something that's going to be an opportunity for someone, hey, I get to take a 3-day weekend. If I get out, not the speed thing, it's just accuracy and understanding what it is that my tasks are. And then, hey, I'm going to take off Friday. John LeClaire, one of our guys, is taking tomorrow off. Took last Friday off. Am I annoyed he's getting time off? No. He earned it because everything's getting done, and I'll cover him for the day. We're a team, not someone trying to get a task done. I don't know. I went off on a...
We have a question.
Oh.
Yeah, this is excellent for me. This is excellent for me. I'm very grateful that one of the gentlemen from Cape Cod Lumber invited my boss, Eric Thomas, and he had me come too, which is good. My concern is just like what you said about building a team, that when I first started working for Eric, I did laboring and that sort of thing. He was looking for a couple of muscle guys, and I said, well, what about me? And I'm stronger than I look, you know? And I'm smarter than I seem, really. So,
Stop
but
it.
I did that, and then we talked about the project management. And everything that I read about it and everything, you know, was like the perfect fit for me, and I can do this. When it came time to actually do it, Eric did allow me to do one job where the guys were very cooperative. One of the guys was new and hungry, another guy was new and hungry, and the other guy was very, you know, willing to let me kind of execute and help him plan. And but that was it. And it's been sort of a struggle since, because I find myself kind of with the kind of Steve kind of thing going on, that the dream, the fire, the hunger isn't there in, you know, when I'm walking into this and I'm outnumbered. So I just wanted to know if you had any advice for someone like me, because I want to help him make $100,000 this year, and then I want to make $100,000. I want to be a business partner, like you said, because I don't work for him, we work together, and I have all that. So it's just a couple of missing pieces, I think. Thanks.
Before you pass it off, what out of that, what do you think your biggest core, like what's the biggest issue with it? You said you alluded to being like Steve. Like, what is the biggest thing for you that's missing?
That the commitment of the crew, that when I first came in.
Do you mean in the sense of supporting you?
No, of just having that hunger of you know, that when I first came in, I had asked the guys, do you want to be a lead carpenter? Do you want to be the foreman? Eric needs a foreman. Who wants
The commitment
to be the
from
foreman?
them,
Pardon
not
me?
you.
That's
So the
right.
commitment from them.
That's right. It's like I'm on fire in 5 different directions because the opportunity is just unbelievable. And but it, like I said, it's just you know, like you hear about finding the guy at Lowe's, and I have my eye on a guy at Lowe's. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna approach him. It's like somebody needs to do something, because he deserves guys like him and guys like you. So.
I mean, there's many pieces to that. I think we've touched on a lot of it, and it really comes down to obviously them first, you know, whether or not they're in it for the right reason, and whether or not that's been vetted, you know, in that hiring process or in the time that they've been with the company. But beyond that, just instilling, you know, like John said, it's like, hey, great job, like on that, or like, you know, showing, you know, gratitude towards what they do. You know, what if people feel as though what they're putting out or that what they're producing is valued, they're going to continue to, you know, improve upon that. You know, for us, you know, we constantly want to do better and better and better. You know, I always say, as long as this is your best, that you can look at that, be proud of it, and that's the best that you can produce right now, that's all that we need. And when that question comes up and it's, well, I could have done better, then let's do it. Let's try that again, because that's what feeds, I think, the fire, at least in me, is having those opportunities to constantly improve.
That's if you have the right people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Which is what I
romantic-
mean.
Yeah.
It starts with them.
But the other part of that is, if you don't have it, you gotta move on. You gotta find someone else that's, while you're dealing with that complication, you have to be going down a different road to finding an alternate person. It's Nick, you remember the first year you were in business? How many talks did we have after a podcast of like, I don't know if this is working?
99.
But it was like, that's the hardest part about being an owner or being a leader, is that sometimes it's not going to be pretty. You're going to have to then pull the plug on somebody. We talked about this in the podcast, and someone DM'd us and was like, yeah, I fired a guy over that podcast.
Yeah,
because, which is crazy. And
Their kids are no longer having Christmas this year.
That was his response to me.
We don't know if that's true, guys.
It may not be. But it's if you don't, yeah. But if they don't cover their salary for a certain amount of time and you're still willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, you still have to be the owner and the leader and be able, because no one else you bring in to that team is going to work around that person or that situation or that issue. So you're going to have to make the hard decisions. And I know there's a skilled trade gap, but there's enough outlets there. You guys all found it to get here somehow. Like there's all like-minded people in this room that you can network with and figure out who they're using for subs, not just sit back and complain. I'm not saying
I
you do
also
that.
think that like that drive is very difficult to shape and teach, and that's a personality type. And I think that when I heard you speak, it was like you have the wrong people in place, and you're going to be banging your head against the wall to try and fix that with who's in place. And you're going to have to get some fresh heads in there, and they may not be the right heads, and then it's going to be starting over again. But you're eventually, long term, will be in a better spot. But you're not going to change somebody's personality type. If they're just not a go-getter, if they're not somebody who has that fire, there's nothing that you're not going to rub off on them.
To expand on what John said, it is really important to, when it comes time to make that hard decision of letting someone go, because it's really unfair to the other people that want that fire, where someone might be slacking off, and whether it's a financial thing, whether it's the fact that they have a job, whether it's the fact that they get a company vehicle, whatever the case is, they're looking at that as like, that guy's putting 10% effort in, and I'm busting my ass over here. That, that is hugely important.
What I would say is this conversation right here is not about the skilled trades gap. This is a leadership. Leadership and management, it's not exclusive to the trades. I can tell you from my experience as well.
I think we got a question back there, and Steve, you don't need a mic.
I can't get over everyone talking. I feel like I'm living Good Will Hunting right now, like in real life. So,
Steve.
This is a question for Nick, only because you brought an army. Your preference on recruiting, would you prefer to have a young tradesperson come up through your ranks and you train them, or would you prefer to hire a tried and true employee that might have 15 years of experience?
I would prefer to train in-house, and there's guys that, I don't think any of us have 15 years of experience, but but what I like about the, doing it in-house is that we have a different approach on a lot, with the way we build, the team building, who we are as individuals, but, that's something that, a lot of my team came with no experience. And they're learning by being in it. And, this is something that came up recently, is that what I want to add to that is actual formal training, whether it's partnering with a school like North Bennett Street.
Do you have established procedures for?
No. It's very, I'm being honest, it's very much like, it's very casual, and it's like working together and working through problems. And there's guys that have more experience that are, teaching the ones that have less experience, but the guys that have less experience also come at that same problem a totally different way. And what I love about that is they work off each other. It's never like, hey, it's my way or it doesn't work. Everyone is very open to, suggestions despite the quote-unquote rank of their position.
And Steve, I've done it both ways. The two employees we have, one is out of college, and the other one had a business for 10 years. So it's whoever's going to really match us, personality-wise and drive, that you can basically take strengths from one person and the other one and then compensate the other way. So there's really no silver bullet, I think.
Keep the mic, I got a question for you.
Fire away, boss.
Just recently you had talked about it's okay if this guy goes plays golf on Wednesday as long as he's getting his job done, right? And to some extent I agree with that, but how
You a golfer? You can go with him.
Anyways, how do you internally resolve that issue, right? Because if I have an employee and he says, oh, I want to go play golf Wednesday afternoon, you say, yeah, hey, fine, go ahead. That's fine. I understand you're being a nice guy with friends, you go play golf, you're getting your job done. But part of me also sits back and says, being a business owner, there's probably something he can do to make his job better, make the company better, make the client even happier, and exceed the expectations that I previously set for him.
You can substitute that with anything. Maybe they have a school engagement they have to go to that afternoon. Are you going to penalize them for that too? I'm not keeping a track record.
There's luxury things, and then there's
But
I won't say required things, but like I want to go see my kids' pageant at
But we could say that about social media. Do we need to have time for that, or can I get another invoice out? You can substitute. There's always too much to do.
not to do it. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, does it come across your mind at all, or are you just the friendly employer that says, hey, yeah, go have fun, man, you're getting your job done.
We talked about this the other day.
yeah, I mean, I think, my thought on that is that, the exceeding expectations is part of the role. Where it's not like if they're just hitting the mark, that's fine. And over time, if someone is just hitting the mark and they're taking those days off, they're not going to be penalized in the sense that you took all that time off for golf. They're just going to naturally be phased out because they're not there for the right reason. I think where it's if they're there for the right reason, they're getting their work done and they're exceeding expectations and they want to do that. That's where that freedom comes into play.
I think it's a lot like when it's gonna be crazy, but like if I take some kids from hockey and I buy them dinner, okay, and the parents like, hey, I want you to Venmo me the money. It's like, no, I'm gonna just let it add up. You get me? You're gonna repay me at some point. It's the same thing when they're working on a Saturday for the full day. I'm also not keeping track of. I'm thanking them obviously, but it's not like, hey, now that offsets that Wednesday that they went to this. It's that open that when it comes to the closeout of a project, which we're all aware of, there's no 9 to 5 anymore. It's like 12 o'clock at night. And I'm not asking it to happen, but they're right by your side because of this environment that we've created, that it is an open door where it's not like they're just taking off and I'm not aware. I can still cover because someone has to be responsible there. But there's a kind of a...
Looking at the big picture rather than the small picture
Today.
right in front of you.
Well, I think the other struggle there, though, is as you grow, that's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, when 4 of your employees are taking off to go play golf.
Right. Well, or the one.
Together, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of my questions. So I've been that employee that's, okay, if you get your job done, but now I get things like I was getting things, and finally I put my foot down. I said, this is how it's going to be. Because I got one guy saying, oh, I'm not driving to Boston. I don't like to work in Boston. And then I got another guy, he's on his phone 24/7 looking at his phone. And I finally had, and I'd say, hey, listen, you need to put your phone down, you need to pay attention to this, less distraction, less mistakes. And I was trying to be all that at the time, but I found like it was just being taken advantage. And finally I just said, you know what, this is it. You're going to Boston, you're putting your phone away, or you're fired, and go find another job. So that's how I felt like I had to get to the point because I let that go where you're saying, well, if you got your job done, just go.
Do they still work for you?
See,
Yeah.
Both of them?
I also think there's 2 different, I guess, like outlooks on this, and I think that I would kind of lean more heavily towards Steve, where it's like there's always things that could be done, or I think that Nick, oftentimes, like one of your flaws is that you don't get angry at anyone. There's never a negative, and I think that it does create a culture where it's like, hey, if we have to take off, we could take off. Or even we walked in today and I didn't know that his guys were coming to the show, but it's like 8:15, his guys have their feet up on the table. And I'm like, how does Nick afford to have 2 guys sitting in his shop right now with their feet up on the table? But realistically, I wouldn't put that past you to have guys working oh, they're on the clock right now and Doug's filming them. But I think that it's almost like a lot of people now, they have even bigger companies or the tech companies where they have alcohol in their office, or like they can go get a beer, and like that just doesn't make sense to me.
If any of you guys, I want to flip this to one of you guys because I feel like you guys could answer it better. What do you guys think that it's too lenient on that sense where, like,
Of course they're going to tell you no.
No, answer it honestly.
It could be a little more.
I guess what I mean by no, but what I guess I'm getting at is I don't see the leniency as an issue. If it started to become an issue, then there would be corrective action, but it's never become an issue. And I don't know if that's a product. Tanner's definitely going to answer this. I don't see
it. Depends on the person. If you have like a dirtbag who's like, oh, I'm every Wednesday.
But this is the thing. It's like we've built a team and a culture around certain people that, in my opinion, would never take advantage of it. If we went down the road of them taking advantage of it, big picture, they don't belong here. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Steve, Nick's hiring, and I'm considering.
Hold on. Go ahead, Tanner. Hold on, I'm going to pause you there because everyone's like, why didn't we get Friday off? We take from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day off entirely. So we work the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Nobody asked that.
Everyone looked at me when they said that.
You good.
All right.
Drop it for you.
I own a painting business with my father, and we currently have 10 employees, a team of 10 guys, and from my point of view, you know, from following what you guys are doing and, you know, following NS Builders, and I could be wrong, but I think that a lot of, you know, some of the guys that work with us, when either my father or I get to the job site, they're like, oh, they're here, you know, like, versus other guys that when we get to the job, you know, they'll look at us and they're like, hey, what's up, man? What are you doing? You know, how's your day been? So I think the culture at NS Builders, from what I see, is when either a manager or, you know, owners are coming around, it's like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? You know, we're here, we're working, we're doing our job, and, you know, we're, you know, doing what we love to do. So I think it's building that culture in your business and finding people that want to be part of that, you know, versus those guys that just want to show up for a check and, you know, be on their phone for half of the day or, you know, doing whatever they want to do so that the time goes by faster. And so I think, you know, it's bringing, you know, establishing that system.
I think it really, well, it's funny you just ended with establishing the system because I was going to say it's really not a system. It's more informal, and that's what I think the struggle I have with systemizing it is, because it is person by person and case by case. It's not, you know, not everyone is going to be, you know, working at 100% every hour that they're there. Some guys might be on the lower end of that, in the middle. None of that makes them a good or bad employee in the big picture of, you know, what they're taking advantage on the personal end of that. You know, the guy that might be coming in for, you know, and not putting 100% effort into it probably isn't reaping any of the benefits when there's a last minute, you know, hey, can I take tomorrow off? Like, is that all right? Or, you know, any case like that, it really is person by person and case by case, I think.
I mean, for me, it's also the fact that I would love for everybody in the company to have ownership of the company, meaning each project. So, like, I opened it up to everybody in my company to come here, and no one showed up. I think John was here for like 10 minutes and was like, hey, everyone's delivering everything at the same time, so I got to go. So it was like, you get me? There's part of this is that it's not just me, that you can't build a company or a team on one person, that if so-and-so is not there, then this whole area is not getting done, or whatever it is. If Ken's not in the shop doesn't turn the lights off. Like, something has to be made where it's a team effort, where someone can compensate, or, I'm going to use like a pregnancy and a baby, Steve, instead of golf from now on. Like, how tough it is during that time of life to kind of even it off, but you want the rest of your team
every week.
But you want the rest of your team to compensate for that person. That's the goal, I guess, without having to say, hey, everyone step up. You want it to be between the lines, which goes back to culture, but it's very, very tough to do, and I wish I could give you that in writing and say, this is what you got to do, but it doesn't work.
I think that like basically dovetails with the gist of this conversation. It's how are you attracting these younger guys and girls to come work for you? And like Nick has done a very good job of doing that. I don't know as far as retaining and everything else. Like I don't know enough about your company or who works for you, but you've basically created an environment that, for lack of a better, just to get like bodies in the door, looks like it's fun. Like it looks like it'd be fun to come work for you. But then you are, in real life, you're giving people an opportunity to put their heart into it and to create something that they're proud of. And I think that takes a certain budget, that takes a certain schedule or leniency in that schedule to do. And I think that in the long run, to create a construction company where you have people who show up, who are hungry to learn, who are excited to be doing what they're doing, they have to be able to have the opportunity to be proud of what they're doing. If you come in, you're like, you have to get this done, I don't care what it looks like, and you're getting paid X amount, like, you're not going to be excited to show up to work. But you are going to be excited to show up to, if you put something on somebody's plate where it's like, this is what I need done, this is what I'm budgeting as far as your time, and like, this is my expectation, and I want you to put your everything into this, and I think you're going to be able to attract a different type of employee.
Did you ask anybody why they came on to NS Builders?
The TV, the camera, probably.
The shirts.
Look at Doug. Where's Doug? Where is he?
On the back.
See?
Yeah, I think that's probably what excites me about this industry the most, is collaborating. And whether it's employees, the homeowner, designers, architects, photographers, every videographers, like everyone that's involved in what we do on a daily basis, I love the collaboration and having the conversation, even about the smallest details. Were you waving or raising your hand? I wish Mike was here because he would be clapping right now. You're absolutely right in that.
You ran into that a bunch.
Yeah.
When you first started growing, that like Nick was bidding stuff a certain way, as if he were going to do it, and then setting his guys loose on the job with zero expectation of how long it would take, and they're taking like 3 times longer than he had budgeted. 5 times longer than he had budgeted.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think a lot of guys, anyone that's in a position where they might be working for themselves or starting to grow, that's a very real thing. It's, considering how fast, I guess the way I've explained in the past is that I'm going to look at something, all right, how long is that going to take me? If I think it's going to take me 10 hours and I build 10 hours and it takes me 11, 12, 13 hours, I still end up getting the same amount of money, and I'm just taking less money per hour. That doesn't happen when you're paying someone else an hourly rate to do that. So that's something that you quickly learn, and setting expectations, whether it was like, you're referencing a walnut staircase that I thought we could do in 2 weeks. It took 10. But it was the same thing. We never even had the conversation on how long or what I expected it to get done. I knew what I wanted the product to be, and when I was on site and the question came up, I'm like, it doesn't matter. This needs to be perfect. That's what I sold the client. Let's go with it. And I mean, financially, that's one of those things where it's like, that's a mistake on my behalf, but it was ultimately for the right reason of growth for the company and for the client, because I sold them a particular end result. And regardless of how long it took to get there, that's what they deserve.
And you do the same thing for a subcontractor. Let's say that staircase is being subbed out by somebody. You guys would work on a budget. Let's say it's a custom hood. Like, this is what my expectation is. I set this with the client. This is what I have left to work with. And it's not like, hey, compromise. I'll take that 2 days later, but I still want that design. So it's very similar.
All right, so we got one final burning question. We're a little bit over 3 o'clock, so.
I thought we had till 4.
3.
I know. I'm just messing.
Who's next?
The question I have is, do your businesses have relationships with VOTEC schools? If so,
Great one.
how has that worked out for you? Or do you find that they're just too green?
The answer to your first question is no, but to elaborate on that, that's something that currently it's an open conversation. And I mentioned earlier the North Bennett Street School, and that's someone that I've reached out to in helping develop, this program or opportunity for my team, and then ultimately anyone to go in there and to expand their skill set. So you alluded to them being too green. I don't.
So students who are graduating from VOTEC.
Sure. But I would never, regardless if they're graduating from, health science and want to get into it, or if they're graduating from carpentry and want to get into it, the too green thing isn't something that frightens me. It would be if they have the right personality. I don't care what you graduated from.
I don't have a relationship with the VOTEC school. I'm just too small, to be honest, that I don't need that number of employees.
From the podcast, have you talked to anyone that's been successful connecting with a VOTEC school you can think of?
Specifically to a VOTEC school, no.
Okay.
But speaking of the podcast, like every episode, Johhny mentioned someone fired someone last week regarding an episode, but that has opened up a lot of conversations. And the reason that I attribute the success of that podcast is because we're open to having these conversations, but we're also talking about the issues that all you guys are having on a daily basis, and having some humility with it, where it's, we're all dealing with it. Someone needs to talk about it. And if no one's going to talk about it, we're just going to constantly be in the dark. I guarantee every one of us has felt as though when you're running into cash flow issues or an issue with your company, that you're like, I'm the only person that's dealing with this, because John down the street's crushing it. He just bought a brand new truck, and it's all bogus. And that's what that's really the big picture here. We're going off, we're sidetracking here, but.
No, I mean, I tried the Voc school thing, and we're not set up for having carpenters that are in-house. So I had this idea that I could bring them in when our trim guys are in, and I would pay them to work with the finish guys to be like, hey, this guy's putting a staircase. Don't do anything but just watch him and try and be his third hand, whatever tool he needs. And that organic mentality didn't work. I found the kid like in a closet with a headlamp on doing baseboard, and it just it stunk that way. But we did give the opportunity for guys to intern with us over the summer. So it's not like we're trying to teach carpentry from the trade school as part of it, but trying to give more of that management, which is our sweet spot, and understanding overall how the industry works, meaning from foundation to finish. Whatever time they step onto a job, they're all running at different paces. So if they want to be exposed to that, they can pick up a lot. So the internship, which is, light on hours if they want it to be or more, it's not a huge impact to the budget for us. If they're sweeping floors, it's always a bonus. So that's how we've tried to work that into our system. It's not ironed out like some other guys. I know, I forget who it is. He has a dedication of 2,000 hours a year for internships, whoever it's going to be. Not just one person, but a bunch of people. And that's a good goal to set. I haven't been able to hit it yet, but it's something that I'm striving for.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure to be up here. It's we're in an hour, or we've been into this for an hour, which is what we were allowed to be up here. So these guys, I think you guys are hanging around, right? No one's going anywhere. So if you have any other questions, you can come, grab them. The floor is open till 4. I want to personally thank Chris and the people at Cape Cod Lumber for having me and these guys up here. And thanks to you guys for hanging out and asking questions. And Tyler, thanks for opening up the audience. Made my life a lot easier. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks again, guys. If you guys made the show, we appreciate you guys making the trek down here. And if not, we appreciate you listening to the episode. As always, you can find us on the web, themoderncraftsman.org. Email us at info@themoderncraftsman.org. Real quick, if you guys emailed us in the last 2 weeks, unfortunately our email server was down, and if we didn't get back to you, resend that email, because we certainly lost it. info@themoderncraftsman.org, _Modern on Instagram. And as always, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes or any of the podcast apps. Appreciate you guys. Thanks.